Hello and welcome to a Believing Heart podcast, a podcast about video games and the like. I'm your host at Mario8th. Find me across the internet, all at Mario8th. You can find me on the Twitters, on the Tumblrs, on the ggapps.io to see what video games I'm playing, on the co-hosts if I ever post there again. And if you're listening to this on YouTube, you can find the audio version on anchor.fm/Mario8th. Anyway, it has been a slow news week. I've pulled about one story. There's actually been a bunch of stuff going on. Overwatch 2 launched to disaster. Someone broke their back at TwitchCon, which is very unfortunate. They announced release dates for Persona 3 and 4 on newer consoles, but I mean, none of that is stuff that interested me in talking about. So, I've got a couple of games I can talk about, but first, let's jump into the news where Splatoon 3 is selling nicely in Japan. And so I'm just going to read this blurb that I pulled from Video Games Chronicle. Again, links in the show notes. Quote, given that 3.9 million physical games were reportedly sold in Japan last month, this means Splatoon 3 accounted for 69% of all boxed games sold during that period. With the headline of this article being 69% of all physical games sold in Japan last month were Splatoon 3. Now, on the surface, what that does say is Splatoon 3 is selling really well in Japan. But I just wanted to say, 69, dude. Nice. And that is it for news. Anyway, on to what I've been doing. Wow, this is really going to be a shorter one, isn't it? I've only played a couple different games last week, which is more than I usually play. So I finished up playing Splatoon 3, and Splatoon 3's single player is truly great. They really figured out to do it. They figured out how to put together this type of campaign. Now, I know the sequel, Splatoon 2, their initial single-player campaign was a lot like Splatoon 1's in that you go through a series of linear levels, but then with Octo Expansion, which I've really loved, you can listen to me talk about on last week's episode, they split it up in a much better way. They made all the levels shorter. They gave each of the level a unique gimmick, like every single one of the levels, where instead of just going to the end of the goal, sometimes you're breaking targets, sometimes you're doing specific battle challenges, and I really had a great time doing it. Now, my biggest complaints with Octo Expansion were entering each of the levels cost quite a bit of the monetary, the points, whatever the currency was, where the lowest cost was 100 to get into the level, and you would only get 200 backs in some cases, or a similar metric of a similar proportion of how much you're paying and how much you're getting back. And it made it a little more stressful than I wanted it to be. Splatoon 3's single-player campaign just threw that out, where a whole chunk of levels, probably the easier ones and the ones that are most likely going to be on the main campaign trail, all of those are free to enter. And even the ones that do cost money, they're only like 20, 30, 40 fish eggs to get in, which makes it so that if you get stuck on a level for a while, you're not breaking the bank, and it's just a lot less stressful. Plus, most of the eggs that you do use, at least initially, are used on the actual overworld levels themselves. That's also something I liked. They brought back in overworld maps, and they made them feel a lot better than they did in Splatoon 2. Splatoon 2, it kind of felt like a designed level, but Splatoon 3, it still was a level, but it felt like an actual place as well. Like, this might have been inhabited by people at one point, but now it's a level where the little inkling guy is going around. And these levels are coded by this fuzzy goop that your little buddy needs to eat eggs and able to consume the goop. I thought I just worked out really well. All the levels were really fun. Even the ones I had to try a couple different times, I still got them relatively quickly and never felt truly frustrating. Just the breadth of different types of levels, the way, like, sometimes you have to break targets with this weapon, and then sometimes you have to, then a different level, you're still breaking targets, but now you're on a grind rail and you have a different weapon, or now you have a time limit and you need to just break as many at once with the bucket or whatever. I just thought it was incredibly organized. They even gave us a Grandmaster Galaxy equivalent at the very end. And it was a fairly hard level at the start and at the end for me. The middle two sections were easy, luckily. Luckily they gave checkpoints. I would have been so mad had they not segmented it into 4 different checkpointed areas. Even then, if you do die during one of the segments, each of the 4 areas are pretty long before you get to a checkpoint. Oh, but there's a combat section at the very end that I tore my hair out while trying to play. I guess I'm bad at Splatoon in terms of actually fighting other Inklings, or in this case, Octolings. And so I died so many times on this final section to the point where I said, okay, I need to step away. I put down my controller, I went for a short walk, it wasn't too hot. I was sweating on the way back. I hate Arizona, it's too hot here. But it was manageable to be outside at 9 o'clock at night or whatever, but I came back, picked up my controllers, and then the game crashed, and I had to beat the whole level again, and that was really sad for me. But I did beat it, I did complete Splatoon 3, I had a really great time doing it. I really loved Splatoon 3. I cannot wait for, hopefully, there's going to be DLC. I think they hinted at it a little bit at the end there. I really want DLC, and I also really hope Pearl and Marina are back. I missed them so much after Octo expansion. I think they're probably my favorite of the 3 groups at this point. Although, Deep Cut still has a bit of time to warm up to me. So, but still, Pearl and Marina, they're my faves. Anyway, that's it for Splatoon 3. I also beat Splatoon 3 and I was like, okay, what am I gonna do now? I had a bunch of games I could have played next, and I think I've set an order I'm going to follow, but I didn't know what to play in the interim. I just had so many options, and then what I wound up doing was, a bit ago, a little over a week, I turned on my PS Vita for some reason, and then I booted up, or at least loaded up, Shovel Knight. I had already beaten Shovel Knight on the Vita and completed the main Shovel Knight campaign, but I had never touched the Plague Knight, the Spectre Knight, or the King Knight DLC until a few days ago, and I was like, I don't know what to play. Oh, my Vita's sitting right here. I'm gonna jump into Shovel Knight Plague of Shadows. And I tell you what, a bit disappointed. Like, the way that I know, so Shovel Knight is a great game, it controls amazingly and has great levels. And then the other 2 DLCs, not the Plague Knight ones, but Spectres and King Knights, they mix up the gameplay and mix up the levels in interesting ways, so I heard. But what Plague of Shadows does is it just gives you Plague Knight, who controls completely differently, not bad per se, but a lot different, and then just plops him into the same exact levels Shovel Knight entered, with a couple different things changed up here or there. And it was disappointing, because the levels are great. The levels are obviously great, they worked so well with Shovel Knight, and with Plague Knight it just didn't work as well. And I've now played through the game 3 different times. One a 100% playthrough to get everything. I tried doing a speedrun achievement where I didn't spend any money. I failed that. I just failed it right now, just a bit ago. Hour and 31 minutes and 2 seconds, with the goal being an hour and 30. I was a minute and 2 seconds over. And I also beat the New Game Plus. So I've played the game a lot. I've gotten used to controlling as Plague Knight. I do not like playing as Plague Knight. It is just not as fun as playing as Shovel Knight. And that's my biggest disappointment. The fact that this entire DLC, admittedly free DLC, and I still really respect Yacht Club games, but that was it. There's like there's an extra section in each level designed specifically for Plague Knight, and then there are sections of the levels where Plague Knight couldn't do that have been modified a little bit so he could get through, but the rest of the game is just Shovel Knight but with a worse moveset. Oh, and the Plague Knight's upgrade system is nice. It's thematically it's really interesting. I get why people like Plague of Shadows. The story is a lot more than it was in Shovel Knight, and the relationship between Mona and Plague Knight was really nice. And also his lair underneath the town was beautifully drawn out. I love the pixel art in this game. It's wonderfully done. But the playing part of playing this video game just was never as good as it was in base Shovel Knight. And that's a disappointment. So I'm going to finish up Plague of Shadows. I've still got probably 2 more playthroughs, one where I don't drink any of the health potions, and one where I go back and finally try and get this speedrun trophy. I'm so mad at myself for being 1 minute and 2 seconds over. And then I've got a list of all the other games I'm going to play. I think I'm finally going to do Psychonauts. I think I'm going to do it, and then by the time I finish Psychonauts, I think the new God of War is going to be out, so I'll probably jump into that. Anyway, I'm continuing to watch Andor. That's really good. That's about it. And that's about it for the episode. A much shorter one this week. Thank you so much for listening. If you, again, anything I mentioned, so in this case, just the article from Video Game Chronicle is in the show notes down below, as well as the links to all the social medias I use, which again is Twitter, Tumblr, GGApp.io, co-host. And if you're not listening on the audio version, you can find it on anchor.fm/Mario8th. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next time.